What's going on, guys? I recently dove into the world of the AAP-01 as it's one of the most customizable and versatile platforms on the market. I have some awesome top-shelf AAP-01 full build videos on the way, but I wanted to take the time to cover each installation separately for those of you looking for installation guides. This video is kicking off a playlist covering everything AAP-01 like trigger, hammer, nozzle, hop-ups, barrel assembly, bowl upgrades, and much more, I'm sure, as I build and document my own AAP-01 platform from the ground up on this channel. Today I'm covering the CowCow stainless steel upgraded hammer set installation, arguably one of the most important upgrades if you want your AAP-01 to survive standard wear and tear on the field. The AAP-01 stock hammer is most likely going to break on you at some point. I do suggest installing either the CowCow complete hammer set as shown in this video, or at least just the upgraded steel hammer from Action Army, as they will significantly extend the life of your internals. As always, all products shown in this video can be found with links in the description below. So let's go ahead and replace the stock hammer set with the upgraded stainless steel set from CowCow. We only need the lower receiver for this process, so you can remove the upper by simply pressing the button at the rear and pulling off the upper receiver and setting it aside. To remove the hammer housing, punch out both of the rear body pins. If your AAP-01 is stock from the factory, you can punch them out from left to right. The right side of the pins are going to have serrations, making it difficult to punch it out the opposite direction. With the body pins out, I use a flathead screwdriver to pry out the hammer housing. The button at the rear to open the pistol up is going to fall free during this process. You can simply set it aside. The spring that's associated with this button should remain in place no problem, so don't worry about that. With the hammer housing slightly loosened, I continue to wiggle it free, pulling the trigger to allow it to unhook from the trigger bar and come completely off. Be sure to cup the hammer housing with your hand, as there are some springs under tension that may fly out when pulling the hammer housing free. With the hammer housing removed, I set the lower aside. Popping open the CowCow upgraded hammer set, we will replace almost everything inside the hammer housing while still using the original springs from the factory hammer set. To disassemble the factory hammer set, first remove this retention nub and spring. Before opening the hammer housing up, it helps to remove tension from the hammer set by unhooking this spring here. I simply unhooked it with an Allen key. With the spring no longer under tension, I then punch out the center pin and pull it free, releasing the stock hammer. The hammer spring, and the valve knocker can now all be pulled free. With these parts removed, I now punch out the bottom pin, releasing the sear and our final spring. The CowCow steel parts are on the left, and the stock internals are on the right. It's now time to reassemble this hammer housing using the CowCow upgraded steel hammer parts alongside the stock AAP-01 springs. You can get upgraded springs here if you want, however I didn't feel that was necessary for this particular build. Getting these parts back in can be very tricky on your first go around. Just have some patience and don't force anything. Starting with our new CowCow hammer, place the CowCow rocker inside the pinhole on the top of the hammer. Using the stock hammer spring from our AAP-01, lay it onto the hammer as shown, with the shorter spring end facing towards the rocker. From here, I slid the hammer into the housing, catching the longer end of the spring onto this ledge here. This part is tricky, but you need to keep that spring end in place, wiggle the hammer into position so that all the holes line up, and then push a pin through to keep it all in place. I used an Allen key to line up these pinholes and then pushed the pin into the Allen key, taking its place as a retention pin. I'm only pushing the pin in to where it holds the spring and the hammer in place without going completely through to the other side, leaving room for my other parts to fit in. With a gap still in the center of the hammer, I can fit the new CowCow valve knocker. Pulling back the hammer will allow the valve knocker to slide into place. Pushing the squared end of the valve knocker through the squared hole in the housing. With the valve knocker in place, I pushed the pin that was holding the hammer in place all the way in, securing all of these parts in place. For the sear and the sear spring, I lay the sear in place and push the housing pin back through, leaving room for the spring on the left-hand side. Once the spring is lined up, the pin can be fully pushed through into place. The last step here is just re-hooking this sear spring into this hole in the valve knocker. And that completes the CowCow hammer set installation. We can go ahead and reinstall the spring and retention piece on the side of the housing. And then drop the housing back into the lower. I'm realigning the trigger bar into the housing and then carefully pushing the housing back down into place on the lower receiver. I forgot to reinstall the rear button, so simply pulling up the housing a tiny bit will allow this to be put back on, and it will be held into place once the hammer housing is set in the lower. To finish things up, I just push the body pins back in. I like to go from right to left for consistency. I did a quick function test to ensure that all the parts were working together properly. And with everything looking good, I reinstalled the upper. And that completes the CowCow AAP-01 stainless steel hammer set installation. I have huge plans for this AAP-01 build, transforming it from a pistol into a milsim-oriented primary platform. Feel free to subscribe here to get notified when any and all other AAP-01 installations go live, as well as my ground-up, personal AAP-01 build video and gameplay. I hope this was helpful. As always, thanks for checking out the video, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.